Welcome along, guys. It's another Soulful House Mafia talk. Tuesday evening, the 31st of August, 8 o'clock here in Spain, 7 o'clock for yourselves in the UK. Whatever time it is, whatever part of the world you're in, or whatever day you may be watching this recording, welcome along. We've got an action-packed conversation for you tonight. A little bit weird in the fact that I tried to go live on Facebook earlier today, and I've had some restrictions put on my account for some reason. Maybe it will be lifted in a day or so, or maybe I'm blocked forever. So who knows? But we'll get that sorted. Before I talk to today's guest, I just want to talk about this event again, give it a quick mention. I understand it was spoken about on ITV News today as well. Dance for Stevie, Sunday the 3rd of October 2021, a fundraising event in support for Steve Lavinier, who is currently recovering or in the grips of dealing with COVID, as I'm sure you're all aware, and all the details are here on the screen. Okay, I'll give you some more information on that at the end of the talk. Without further ado, let me flick across to today's guests. No, on that one, I don't want to because there's nobody there. I want to go to this one. There we go, all sorted. To my top left, Mr. Lee Wright, Back to Basics, resident panelist and talk host with me on Soulful House Mafia. Top right-hand corner, a gentleman who will be known by so many people around the world in the music industry. A gentleman who, even just looking at him and mentioning his name, puts a massive smile on my face. I've got so much love and respect for this guy. There's lots of reasons why I'm hoping to cover over the next however long it takes us to hear his story. And once again, Mr. Gary Dillon. Welcome along, brother. How are you?
I'm good, Ed. I'm good. Evening to you. Evening, Lee.
Evening.
So, yeah, a little bit of a strange one in the fact that I usually know I'd be welcoming along people and giving shouts out to them. So I'll do that in the virtual world because I know we are going to get a hell of a lot of people interested in this conversation. And I say to all the guests that we have, Gary, there's no way we are going to be able to cover your life story. There's no way we're going to be able to get all of the juicy bits. But I would like you, I'm sure you've probably thought about it, to tell us where you feel your story begins, the relevance of your story in the music scene, the Soulful House music scene.
It's a good question, Ed. You know, I couldn't put my finger on where it started because I never actually saw myself as being someone involved in the music business. But now when I look back, I think from the age of about 14, I've always had a connection to music when I used to lock myself in the bedroom and listen to the Capital Radio Countdown 5 between 5 and 6 every night. And there was always a competition between Donna Summer and the Sex Pistols. And it was just mad, you know, because when I started work, my first pay packet, I went and bought a mobile disco. Okay. But I still never considered myself to be a music bod.
Right. So just to interrupt very quickly, early 60s, I would say that you were born, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Carry on. Just to put a time frame on it. Carry on then.
Yeah. So I'll be 60 later on this year.
Okay. Brilliant.
So it's very strange how things went about because I started doing parties at a very early age. You know, I had this mobile disco unit and I used to hire out the local football hall and I used to put on parties for my mates on a Friday night once a month. But again, I never thought I was in the music business.
So what kind of music? Across the board music?
No, I was always into a bit of soul, funk and disco, you know. I liked all that. I used to collect records, I used to buy records. I wasn't an avid collector. But I like my bullets, you know, and I've still got them. They're still on the top shelf, up in the room, and and it was an accidental chance meeting with Nicky Holloway that actually got me in to this sort of industry on a full-time basis, and I was a chippy by trade. I'm a carpenter and joiner by trade. Right. So I had this mobile disco thing running. once a month. Occasionally used to give it to a friend, and we used to do weddings and parties and that. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine. Says, "Oh, a mate of mine needs some record shelves built in his flat." And I went round there, and of course it was Nicky's flat. And I'd been going to the Soul Weekenders, so I knew Nicky. I didn't know him personally at the time, but I knew him, Tongy, and all that, Bob, through going to all the Caister Weekenders. And we got chatting, and this was right early 87. And this was literally as Trip had just kicked off.
Right.
So Nicky said to me, like, we obviously got chatting. I did the work, and said, "Why don't you come to the club?" Went to the club. Obviously, we all knew what was going on in the early 70s. Early 80s. And he invited me to get involved. So I started helping out with the promotion, setting up the stage. I actually built the DJ platform that connected up in the middle of the dance floor. And that was it. I was in. And I didn't actually leave my job. I just never went back. So there's a funny story that a couple of years later, I got one of these phone calls, missold a pension and all that sort of business. And as I was transferring my pension, they said to me, "Oh, we thought you were off sick." I hadn't been at work for 2 years. So that's how I managed to go from being in the building trade to slipping into the music business, because I learned an awful lot from Nicky through promotion, the events, the stage management, security. You know, it was full on. We were in that club. We were in the Astoria, 2.5, 3 years, Fridays and Saturdays. So there was an awful lot of setting up. You get to meet a lot of people. You meet a lot of the DJs. It was full on, but it was almost like diving in at the deep end, because that was the groundbreaking club. And of course, you then got to the after parties, and then the other things. The warehouse parties were all kicking off at the same time. So there was a lot of fresh blood in an old established industry. And what I meant by that was that, there was an opportunity for a lot of young music-loving entrepreneurs to break into this, because it wasn't part of the establishment. They didn't know about it. They didn't know about warehouse parties. They didn't know, they didn't cotton on to this brand new house scene that was starting. So those people that had those little things going on in their areas managed to sow the seeds and grow the seeds. Would you say
there was sorry to talk over you. Would you say it was very tribal back then in regards to who people generally ran with? Was it quite segregated is maybe the wrong word. Was it very cliquey as to who, the little pockets of who worked with who? Or did, once the whole rave culture and the give everyone a hug kind of thing came about, did everybody work closely together, or were there eras where it was quite, well, that's their manner, you know what I'm getting to?
I suppose you had certain promoters that had been promoting before that they went, there was the soul and disco promoters, the rare groove promoters, they sort of evolved into where they blended into the house scene, and of course they had their set of DJs, and I think that's the same for all promoters. You've got your friends, you've got your core, and you build around your core, because your core do the legwork. It's almost like your team. You've got your team wrapped around you. You might do something in your own manner. You might step out of doing it in your town and moving into the city, or look for a bigger venue. And what happens is it's like the core builds layers. It's like a dartboard. You start off as the bullseye with maybe a nucleus of 3, 4, 5 people. You're brainstorming. Then those people bring in another layer of people that they trust. And I suppose
But it is very much like a family tree, isn't it? It is like
Yeah,
the house
yeah,
mafia. It grows, so you got your layers and your branches.
yeah. And I think you've then got your personalities. I mean, some personalities have a rivalry. Others just embrace everyone and just say, you know what, let's crack on. Or they do merges. I mean, we did that on more than one occasion. Is you meet like-minded people and you gel and you make a new event. One plus one equals two. You do twice as much, and I think that's how a lot of the other things evolved. You started seeing collaborations. You started seeing events being invited to join. So you look at some of the underground events, Garage City herself, and I'm going back before that when Mr. C was doing release with Nathan, and they would invite other people in, and things evolved with Wiggle and Harmony and all these different things. Same thing happened with the Soulful House stuff. So when you look at release, we used to have 3 rooms there, and we used to have guest promoters in the rooms, or we'd invite the DJs and we'd do a co-promotion, and it would be special guests from Bournemouth, Bump and Hustle, and that's how you get on. And to be honest, I always thought that the more the merrier.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything as a rivalry. We as a setup, we did business with everyone and tried to help everyone as much as we could, whether it was booking a DJ, whatever it was, whether it was sharing some advice, sharing a printer. It was, listen,
together you're stronger.
Everyone's invited.
Yeah, well, you say that. Let me just take a quick moment to confirm that people can see us live on YouTube. I've got Duncan James sending a smiley face, and also Julie, former promoter in Birmingham, from Rammed, a place called The Square in Hockley. Nice to have you, Julie. Thank you for being here. And anyone else with us, feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube. I can see them and we will say hello. Okay, so you mentioned release. You need to say how release came about, or you also mentioned Mr. C. Was that something that you took from him, or he gave to you, or what? Because my memory is so very vague over all of this. This goes back. The London connection for myself goes back further than I really have a lot of knowledge about. So this is why I'm interested to hear.
Could I ask? Sorry, Gary. You can hear your accent. You're obviously a southerner, but whereabouts? Is it? Are you coming out of the Essex scene, or is it a London thing that you came up out of?
I'm born and bred in Southeast London, but spent an awful lot of my time in East London, being a West Ham season ticket holder. So I would say I'm a bit of a London nomad, because wherever there was a good night out, you would find me. And I think back then I used to travel light, so I never went round with like a big crowd. So it was quite good for me, so that I could go North London, East London, West London, and various South London things,
Slip in and out of the shadows.
Yeah, and also, you were free to, you could go where you wanted. I mean, you know what it's like when this thing started. Sometimes there were like 2 or 3 things in a night, and if you've got a larger group, trying to persuade people, let's go here and have a look there, it's difficult. So yeah, I used to get about
all around,
to say the least. But coming back to what you asked first, Andy, is Richard, Mr. C, was running a really cool underground event called Release, and that started in the late 80s, and it was a very underground word of mouth event, and it had it was a great event. Never any hassle. The music was eclectic, had a good soulful housey vibe. but it was proper. It was full on. You know, it was a great night, and I was a regular punter there. So I was there not as a DJ. I was there because I wanted to be there, and like I say, great people, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then Richard mentioned that the Shaman was taking off, and he had more commitments with the Shaman. And he spoke to me and Nathan. Nathan was his partner at the time, and basically said, "Look, do you want to get involved with Nathan?" So that's what I did. I got in with Nathan, and we started putting on release parties. And after about 7 or 8, we were approached by Lyndon and Warren from Strictly Rhythm. They were doing a Friday night at the Sound Shaft next to Heaven, and we were on a similar vibe, so we agreed that we would put on an event.
Okay, so Lyndon C, I'm assuming. Warren
Sharif.
Okay, yeah, that's a name that I totally, you know, that the names and they just skip your head. Yeah, of course.
So Warren, you know, Warren used to work with Terry Hunter, and
yeah, I do. Now you say Warren, it comes straight to the front of my mind.
Yeah, so we were looking for venues, and we had a problem with the venue that we had, and I had a couple of other friends that were running events, and I was DJing for Taff and Wendell, and they had a large venue over in Plumstead, which was right on my doorstep. So I approached them and said, "Look, we're stuck for a venue. About the 3 of us all getting together, the 3 different organisations getting together," and that's what we did. We got together. We did this this combination event of the 3 promoters. Kevin Saunderson was headlining, Ricky Morrison, Jazzy M, and we put the event on, and it turned out to be a blinder. We had just under 1,000 in there. No problems, and it was that good. Obviously, we got round the table again and said, "Right, who's up for game number 2?" And it was suggested that we all had to sling a bit of dough into the pot to get the next one off the ground. And Warren and Lyndon decided that they didn't want to do it as a threesome. So they sort of carried on doing what they were doing, and Taff, myself, and Nathan went on to start up Release the Pressure.
Okay, so the year of this would have been
1989.
Right. Okay.
No, sorry. Let me go. 89, Release the Pressure. No, it would have been about 90.
Right.
1990.
Okay.
Still got the flyer.
Uh-huh. And still very much based on you mentioned Kevin Saunderson, of course, very much based on that American sound, that soulful house, the mellower sound, rather than like the back end of the rave scene, which was still going quite heavily at the time, right?
Well, the funny thing is, Andy, the music wasn't soulful house then. I mean, if you go back and you dig out your early MK tracks, you know, Fourth Measurement,
mm-hmm.
those were the big, those were the smashers, and I wouldn't consider them to be soulful, but I would say that they had real deep grooves,
mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people were into. They were into the groove, and then what happened then? The DJs realised that there was a real good party groove, which was warm and bouncy, and it would sell more records if you actually had a vocal on it. So, of course, they all tapped into the vocalists, who all happened to be soulful. And I think that's how it came about. You know, it was never set up as a soulful house thing. It was house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happened over the years is everyone's tried to break a chunk off and give it a tag, haven't they? You know, and then you find that there's a little niche group of DJs that relate to that little tag. And whether it's Balearic, soulful, deep house, tech house. You know, house is house. And if you look at the today's house music, it's actually no different to what we were playing, nearly 30 years ago. It's a hodgepodge of all good grooves that are all very similar. The beats haven't changed. You know, the cool is, yeah.
Yeah, it's still the same. So,
yeah.
So Release the Pressure was born, and the first I hear of it's quite crazy, really, because we've done a lot of these conversations, and a lot of names get mentioned who we're going to talk about, some of your DJs. And I sat here earlier thinking to myself, we have a long history, which we'll talk about, but I don't actually have a lot of Release vinyl here. And I'm maybe getting ahead of myself with the label. I'm going around in circles. The question I was going to ask you, Release the Pressure for me, synonymous, unless I'm mistaken, for huge nights at the Caf de Paris, right?
Yeah, we ended up there.
When did you get there?
We ended up there in 1992.
Okay. And did you do a lot of big things in between there?
Yeah, we used to do, I mean, I've got an old photograph somewhere of me sitting in our first office. We met some really generous people that, when I look back, that generosity wasn't financial, but certain people allowed us to grow. So some friends of mine had a merchandise company in Diabley Street, about 7 doors along from Black Market, and they used to manufacture the merchandise. And Jerry, who owned the company, said to me, Gary, why don't you come in here? We'll give you a desk. We'll let you have a phone. You pay a couple of quid rent, but at the same time, you can help us move a bit of gear. And they were manufacturing slip mats, DJ bags, and stuff like that. So yeah, why not? You know, we're full on. We're into that. And it was almost like I got a job and I got office space at the same time. And on this photo behind me, you might even see it on my Facebook photos, I've got a wall chart. And on it, each month is a different flyer. And you can see all the different colour flyers in all the different events. And we used to do 4 or 5 in a venue and then move on, because some of the venues we used were bordering legal. You know, if I could, I used to get a TENS license. So that actually has helped in the environment I'm in now, because then I knew how to deal with the police. I knew how to deal with the local authority. I knew how to make a license application. I knew, I learned all that. And we moved from space to space every 6 months, and it was a problem trying to find a place with a toilet. And, it was real underground. Mm-hmm. And we used to turn up with a van and bring all the beers out of the van. I mean, proper old school. Anyway, Taff comes in one day and he says to me, I want you to come down the road. I said, why? He said, I want you to come look at a venue. So we walked literally down to Leicester Square, and he says, we've got a chance of taking this on. And we were in the Café de Paris, and we managed to secure a 6-week trial for Saturday nights. And to be honest, it was like someone handed me a Euro Millions ticket, because we went from doing underground events to probably walking into London's most prestigious venue. And not only that, I got to start laughing, because I really, to this day, I've pulled off some mighty strokes in my time, but to walk into this venue Saturday nights was unbelievable. And like I say, we got in there. First couple of weeks were really good. 4th week, numbers dropped. 5th week, it was a bit touch and go. We were getting close to the trial period ending. And then we knew then that we got a job on our hands. We had to get the legwork out, and we really had to steam in. And then the 6th, 7th week picked up. And we ended up staying in there for just over 3.5 years, I think it was.
Right. It's one place that's legendary that I'm pretty certain that I never went to. I think I'd remember if I went. I wouldn't have played there. I wasn't at that level yet. But yeah, you hear people talk about it. You know, like up there with some of the, you know, just crazy, especially as the scene progressed.
It didn't matter about the level, and you know, we had 2 rooms there, and again, as we say, if you look at some of our flyers, there's people there that they're not names. There wasn't names. It wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't about the name. The club was bigger than any DJ, and we never broke the bank on paying extortionate fees for name jocks.
We'll talk about some of your DJs that play there, because again, very, very respected in the early days in the London scene. I can't drag the names out now, but DJs that were around before myself, I don't know whether Lee got to know them very well. Name some of the early guys that were heavily on rotation for release back in the day. I mean, I can think of Dillon.
So our main 3, we had a core of 3 that we rotated, and then we'd have 1 or 2 guests in the main room, because we were running from 10 o'clock till 6 in the morning. So the nucleus was Ricky Morrison. Ricky was a good friend of ours, and obviously with the Catch a Groove just around the corner from the office. Dean Savon. Dean has been an old mate of ours for time, and Jazzy N, because obviously Jazzy and I had a lot of history that went back. So those were the core 3. And then after that, we had another core group, your Phil Ashers, Chrissy Tees, Jeremy Newell. You know, there was a real good groove, and we tried to get everyone on. You know, and that was the thing. There was no politics involved. We tried to get everyone in to play at the club. And in the other room, we used that for groundbreaking. You know, if someone sent in a tape and they were coming to the club, we'd say to them, yeah, go and have an hour. You know, and
nice.
and it'd be good for them to be on the flyer. They would bring their friends in, and it was all about building a family, building up a network, you know. And those people, I mean, sorry, Lee, go on.
Once you'd gone into the West End, do you think that it kind of made the product slightly more commercial in a venue like that? Because I'm guessing you're going to have a lot of passing trade, West End passing trade as well.
We did when we started, and the interesting thing is, Lee, you know, when you first starting, you're looking at numbers and you're looking at cash, and you're thinking, yeah, obviously the club wanted bodies through the door, but after about 3, maybe 4 months, we had such a good following that had grown with us that we had quite a strict door policy, not fashion-wise, but we needed to know that you were into the groove. You know, we didn't want you coming in and propping up the bar or sending negative vibes around or being, you know, it was a case, come and have a good night out, get into what we're doing, and you're always welcome. So we had a really good door team as well that were part of what we were doing. You know, they weren't bouncers, they were proper doormen. And we had a guy called Jeff who'd been around a long time, very nice guy, knew how to talk to people. And like I say, we were in there for 3.5 years, and I do not believe we had one incident in that club. You know, it's self-policed.
Yeah, that's a great thing. I fully understand that, fully in line with that. Okay, so all the time that this is going on, were you making any more connections within the industry, or were you just focusing on that? Because knowing your story and how it progressed, I want to know how you start to expand your knowledge and reaching out, and the connections are made further afield.
Well, it's like, I mean, I tell you what happened is, obviously, if you had a successful event, and Lee will know this, And but you both know this. What tended to happen was other people would look to do local events. You know, they'd sow the seed in their own little pocket. But what they would do, they would book a DJ. I mean, it's going on now. You know, you see a lot of DJs being booked, and what's important to the promoter is the name tag under the name. So people were getting booked, and it would be Dean Savon, Release the Pressure, or you know, they would be using the secondary name, and this was happening quite a lot. So I think we'd had a chat. Taff and I had a chat, and we spoke to some of the DJs, and we said, look, you're getting booked. Why don't we get a bit organised? If you're going to get booked and they want to use the club name, why don't we deal with the bookings? You know, we'll do the management, we'll do the transport, we'll do everything, and we'll bring it in house. And that way, we've got some sort of, I wouldn't say brand detection, because it wasn't a brand at then, but it was, you know, we did have the icon, we had that logo, and that's what happened. We started. We got Victoria in. We got Juan. Juan joined the team. They had it.
Names Juan had long since forgotten about. Wow.
Yeah. So Juan had experience in doing a bit of bookings, and he phoned us, and he came in. He came to London, and it was like, yeah, come. You know, it was open door. He came in, found a chair, and that was it. We couldn't get rid of him. Victoria came in. She found a chair, and next thing you know, we've got this nucleus of DJ, like a small DJ agency started. Because we were quite efficient, we then sort of had a local DJ. So again, if someone made an inquiry and said, look, who have you got? We'd say, look, this is who we've got at the roster. And then during the conversation, they might say, well, what about this? What about that? And, you know, next thing you know, I'm on the phone. I'll be talking to Bobby and Steve, Chrissy T, Paul Anderson, anyone, you know, and I'd phone them up. Right. Can you do a gig here? How much do you want? And I would be on the phone negotiating deals, getting them the money they wanted, and obviously trying to get our 20% on top. And we would sort it out, get the contracts done, get the deposits done. And yeah, that's what we were doing. And then by chance, I got a phone call from Benji Candelario. And Benji was in town, and I think Benji and I had met, and we'd had a chat and a drink at Ministry, and he just said to me, "Look, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Do you want to give it a go and do some stuff for us?" So me and Benji become very good friends, and he introduced me then to Danny Buddha Morales, Hector Romero, Marcus Wyatt. I flew to America. I then met some other DJs there, and just said, look, you know, this is what we do. We're not like these other companies. You know, we're not gonna get anyone under contract. If we can get you the money, we'll get you the money, and we'll sort out the tours. And that's what we did. And Victoria was very good at that. You know, we used to get the work permits, we'd get the visas, we'd sort out the flights, the transport, and yeah, that's how we got in. That's how we got into the American thing. And then obviously, things all of a sudden became big over. Like, I mean, it seems overnight, but then we ended up in an office block on the corner of Oxford Street and Wardour Street. And I'm looking round, and there's like 40 full-time staff in this building. And you think to myself, how did this come about? Because, you know, we went from like 5 or 6 of us doing the events. We then had the agency sort of thing that had taken off. And then obviously there was another avenue to that, because the DJs then all started doing production. And that then I then sort of said, well, what are you doing with that? You know, they're all walking around with DATs and CDs, not knowing what to do with them. And I would think to myself, there must be a few quid in this. But what can we do? You know, and lucky enough, because we had the shops closed, being in smack bang in the middle of Soho, we could get an opinion. You know, someone could play a CD or a DAT at the club. You'd see the dance floor moving, and it would be right. Okay, let's look at putting some stuff out. And that's when, obviously, Benji had fantastic knowledge of running a record company because he'd been a chief exec in some of the American top labels. He'd had hit records out on Cutting, and that's when we set up Release for Pleasure Music. And what was strange was I'd have a pile of tracks being offered to me from America, but very few from anyone in the UK, which was sad because I always wanted Release for Pleasure to be probably like Defected is now. And don't forget, Defected weren't around then. So Simon's done a great job with Defected. But that is what the whole idea of Release for Pleasure was to actually give UK DJs a platform to sell UK product to a global market, and we would package it well. You know,
I was going to say, but packaged very much like an import.
Yes, that was the whole point of it, and we'd sell it at a UK price. So it was manufactured to look like an import, sound like an import, but be sold at a UK price. You know, so everyone wins. But yeah, rather disappointing that we didn't get some good British tracks out, but the American tracks we got out seemed to do okay.
Yeah.
Janet Rushmore, I came across that one just the other day, really, with the smack mixes, and then the UK producers had a few mixes on there as well. I think it was a double pack, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, there's a funny little story behind that, Lee. So basically, I went to America. I met a guy called Greg Day, who was Choice Records. So he was dealing with Janet Rushmore. He ran out of money. So we'd been chatting, and I don't know what he saw in me, but
you've got a way, Gary. You've got a way about you, mate.
No, but I have to laugh. I laugh. I mean, I have to laugh at everything now because I tell my kids stories, and we do. They're like fairy tales, you know. And so I'm in this office, and they tell me they can't get the masters finished because they got no cash. So I said, right, what do you need? Now, I'm being told they need money to pay Kerry to do the Kerry Chandler mix. They need to finish off production. So I said, yeah, no problem. I'll put up $3,000. Now, going back to what, 90, I think it's 92, 93, around about 93 now, 3,000 quid, pulling out 3,000 quid cash is, 3,000 then is probably worth, what, 20 grand now. So I said, look, I'll put the $3,000 up to finish the track, but it's on a 50-50 split, right? They keep the United States. I'll take the UK and the rest of the world. So they agree. I cough up the $3,000, and their track gets mastered. Now, they don't tell me this. Next thing you know, there's imports coming out, and I'm on the phone. What are you doing? You know, it's meant to be a simultaneous release. You've now put it out. Your versions are now in the UK, and they also delayed giving me the masters. So I then had to go back. I've got 5 remixes done by 5 UK DJs. Jeremy and Dana did a mix. Jazzy M did a mix. Danny Foster did a mix. All the boys did a mix. I said, look, come on, we'll get on board. I did this 10-track double pack, but I thought I don't want it going out too deep, too expensive. So I shrink wrapped it and put $5.99 stickers on it, so it couldn't be sold for no more than $5.99. And we sold it in cheap. because the main thing for me was to get the track out. It was good PR for the company, good PR for the label, great PR for the jocks. And we got it to number 2 in the Kiss chart. And for some reason, which I won't go into detail on during this, it got voted down for the playlists. And I know some people that vote. I know the one person that gave it the thumbs down, which was disappointing. But we were number 2 in the chart for at least 3 weeks, and that decision probably cost us a top 40 hit, because I reckon that track was so good it could have gone into top 40. It was Janet Rushmore was an excellent vocalist, and I actually offered to pay for a video. I had that much belief in the track. I even went back to Greg Day, and even though they pulled a fast one, I said, look, we could do a video for this, but they didn't want to do anything. He offered me another track as compensation, and then did the same thing. They gave me a track, which ended up being the Tempera. You remember?
Yeah.
The track originally was called Urban Discharge.
Drop a House.
Drop a House. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that was mine, right? I paid for it.
Came out on MCA in the end, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So MCA picked it up. They didn't realise that the A&R guy at MCA is a mate of mine. I get on the blower to them and say, look, I own that track. So MCA cut a deal with me. I get weighed on. MCA put it out. Didn't do a good job. It ends up getting re-edited and sampled down to the Tempera, which ends up going massive. Doesn't it?
You know what?
Yeah.
I came across the vinyl of that the other day, right? The Wanna Drop a House. And I was listening to it, and I was thinking, or it was an old tape, and I thought to myself, that sounds so much like that tune that was in the charts. And I totally didn't realise it was part of the same project, because the vocals are actually different to what came out on the Wanna Drop a House, on the Urban Discharge. What they used on the Tempera was totally different, wasn't it?
Yeah, because what they did, I think they took out core samples, and then
that all makes sense now. Crazy.
And they re-looped them.
Yeah.
And so you could tell. I mean, if you could, it wasn't clever sampling, to say the least. But the end
was that Smack Productions?
Yeah. Right. Eddie Perez and Mike Cameron.
Yeah, I only had my hand on that vinyl the other day. Okay, so many different stories from the industry. So how many releases on Release for Pleasure were there actually in total?
I think official releases were probably about 8.
Mm-hmm. 'Cause I was going to say I knew there weren't loads and loads and loads. Someone sent me a message on Facebook earlier when I mentioned it, and they were saying about the one of the Mike Delgado tracks that they're trying to get hold of. It wasn't the Murder EP. There was another one. Can you remember what the?
The EP had Latino Way, the Murder track.
Oh, so it was on that EP. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's what it was. I think it was Latino Way. It was David, I think, was asking about it, trying to get his hand on a copy. Anyway, I won't get lost in my phone. Okay, so about 8 releases in. What was the decision to pull the plug in the end?
Well, I didn't pull the plug. I just thought that, didn't matter about the label, because I didn't think we were getting enough support regarding product, right. And everybody wanted to talk about the dough. So literally anyone that came in the office was like, how much? And I'm thinking, well, hold on, you want to do a JV, you want me to pay you and then pay for everything. And then the biggest disappointment for me is lack of support for there was a lot of passengers, a lot of people wanting piggybacks. And they wanted me to pay for the privilege of a piggyback.
Right.
Not just me, sorry, us, our group. I wouldn't say. So, a lot of tracks that we put out I paid up front. And then later on, people want to argue, oh, you only paid me 3,000 quid and you've done this and you've done that. Well, that's my prerogative. If I'm good at what I do and we make a few quid, that's fine. Because if we'd lost a few quid, you wouldn't have phoned up to say, look, you've lost a couple of quid. Here's a bit more. So yeah, I mean, even now, there's you mentioned a track there. You know, I did a buyout on that track, a complete buyout.
Okay.
And later on, someone's trying to accuse me of stitching someone up. And I'm thinking, hold on.
So it's all gonna be sour.
Yeah, so I'm thinking to myself, I put the money on the table. Things are black and white. It wasn't a record company contract. There's no percentages and hidden this and deductions for that. It's straight cash. You tell me how much you want and we agree a price. That's the deal done. If I go off and make £1 million, fine. But if I take a 5,000 quid loss, I'm taking the gamble. You've taken the money, move on to the next one.
Right.
And yeah, that's happened a few times, you know, and even with the DJ agency, you know, some people would come to the UK, they do like a 15-day tour, decide that they want to stay a week extra. And at the end of the week, they're looking at me saying, oh, you know, I don't think I'm going to work with you again. I said, well, why is that? They said, well, I've been here for 4 weeks. I'm going home with nothing. And I say, well, hold on. You've been here for 3 weeks. You've just spent all your money shopping for the last 7 days. That's not my fault. You got the fee that you asked for, you know. What you want?
The wonderful music industry. The wonderful music industry.
Yeah.
Okay. We got tales for days along those lines.
Yeah.
So let's continue with the story then. I'm curious to get to the part. So we're still sort of like 92, 93, 94. At some point, a shop evolves.
Yeah, I missed a bit, right? There's a section missing between the club and the label.
Okay.
So as I said, I was sharing offices with Jerry and the team at Headline that were manufacturing record shop merchandise. So Taff and I spent more. Taff was out there. He was on the ball. He was going around when he was doing the flying and putting all that stuff out for the clubs. He'd be selling DJ bags in and slip mats. And we started printing slip mats for all the record shops, Black Market, all those people. We were manufacturing the stuff. We were getting the bags. And we sourced the first padded DJ bag. You remember you used to have the flimsy ones. And then we got the first one that had that padding in. And it was the Rolls Royce of DJ bags. For that year, you know? And we were going into the shops at 17, 18 quid a pop. You know, obviously they weren't ours; they were Jerry's. But these bags were being imported in from America, so they were proper American. You know, they were good bags. So we probably sold a couple of thousand. And then someone else decided that they were going to go to China, and they would manufacture the new bag. They would undercut us, and they were literally going around to shops saying, "We can sell you that bag £10 cheaper." Fine. So we decided to manufacture something else, and Taff had found a fabricator, and we started manufacturing the DJ boxes.
Okay.
You know, the flight cases for records. They were a bit heavy, but Taff had found this factory, this guy in Watford, and we started manufacturing the flight case DJ boxes with the nice turn lock on. The guy used to manufacture them for us, and we used to super glue.
Is this with the black panels and the metal edging?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we started doing the black ones and the stucco, the silver. And then we did a run where we had some different colours. I think there was a red, there was a white and a blue. We started doing those, and we'd get a delivery come into the offices, and then literally we'd be cutting carpet, we'd be cutting pieces of carpet, and we'd be sticking the carpet in with Evo stick. And there'd be all these boxes, and of course we'd then be literally putting them into the shop. So that was in between going into the label. So we'd already had a really good relationship with record shops up and down the country, because we were putting bags in and we were putting stuff in. So with the label, we got the label to a certain point, and then other people started coming to us. So we got Winston. Winston was a driver for one of the distributors, and again, he fancied doing some bits and pieces. So he grabbed a chair, he came in, and next thing you know, we've got a distribution company running up. So we've got the DJ agency, we've got the club, we've got merchandise, we've got a label. Now we've got a bloody distribution company. It was like, how did we get here? None of it was planned, and this has all happened within the space of 2.5, 3 years. It was like, you know, you come in the morning, there'd be new faces, and it's oh, this is, you know, it was mad. So the distribution took off. Catch a Groove had got into a position which meant that, you know, they were going to close.
So let me ask about Catch a Groove then, because this is part of the history that's very, very hazy for me. Was Abby the owner of Catch a Groove?
Abby was a director,
okay.
As far as I know. Abby was a director, stroke share, maybe a shareholder.
And was Ricky anything to do with it?
Ricky was, again, I wouldn't know the makeup of the company, but there was Renee and Dave Drew, Abby, Jeremy. I mean, there was a whole team there, wasn't there? Matt White.
Okay, that was Catch a Groove was before I was travelling to London.
So
this is around 94, 95 time, right?
Yeah, maybe earlier than that.
Okay.
Maybe earlier than that.
Okay.
Because I think so. Yeah, I think the doors closed on Catch a Groove, I think around the end of 93.
Okay.
If memory serves me well, because
that's why I wouldn't know anything about it, because I wouldn't have ventured further down the M6 until like 94 times, 95. Sorry, Gary, carry on.
So there was talk about possibly Nigel Benn was going to come in and possibly take over, because Nigel was he still is a big music lover, and Nigel used to do his shopping there, and I think because of whatever in the background with paperwork and whatever, he decided not to, and obviously he had his career to think about. So in the back of my head, obviously I have the light bulb moment, thinking Catch a Groove, great shop, great people, what can we do? And sat down with Abby. Before that, I'd actually sat down with Jazzy M as well, because I liked the idea, and I thought to myself, it's the only piece of the jigsaw that's not there. And spoke to Abby, spoke to Ricky, spoke to Jeremy, and thought to myself, yeah, you know, if we can find a home in Soho, we'll give it a go. So they found, I think, I'm not sure whether it was Abby. Abby found a place, and he said, come and have a look at this. And it was Denman Street. And we got to look inside, and it was the upstairs was tiny. You know, I mean, if you walked in upstairs was probably 20 square meters, maybe less than that. But downstairs had a massive basement.
It was like a TARDIS, wasn't it?
Yeah, so downstairs had a massive basement, and obviously, me being an ex-builder, I looked at it, and I knew my way around planning. So I looked at it, and I went back, and I thought I'll talk to the council. I went to the council, said to them, what's the chances? And the funny enough, the planning office, Westminster Council's planning department was in Berwick Street. So I managed to go round there and I said, look, I'm looking at a premises. What's the chances of being able to use this basement? And the guy came round and had a look at it with me. And he said, look, if you can get a staircase in there, which meets fire regulations, there's no reason why you can't utilise that basement. So I went back to the landlord, this is before we even sorted out contracts. I went back to the landlord and said, look, the floor space is really tiny and that basement is crap and it's got damp and everything else. If I take the building on, I want to make sure that any improvements I make to the building don't come under any rent reviews. So they agreed. So they agreed that I would get this shop. I think at the time it was 11 grand. And this is smack bang on Piccadilly Circus, 11 grand a year and no rent reviews could. So literally we got the keys to the door and all hands to the pump. We built the counters ourselves. We did the painting ourselves. We did the wiring. Joe Bond came in and did the sound. We cut a great big hole in the floor. We put a steel staircase in and we ended up getting 3 shops and 2 offices in this building for 11 grand. and when the 5 year, because we had a 5-year renewable lease, and every 5 years we'd have this conversation, and I think from 1994 to 2008 they never put the rent up.
That's
ridiculous. and we had 3 different departments in there. We had upstairs was doing the eclectic stuff. Sorry. Downstairs you'd have Jeremy, Ricky, Abby doing the house, and we had the R&B in another section. So we had double glazed paneling in there. But it was
I don't remember that. I don't remember.
No, it changed. I mean, over the years it changed. So, the section changed. Noodles came in. Jada Flex, they came in. The section opened up, and over the years it just opened up and blended into one big downstairs. We had 2 offices. One office at one end was for record shop business, and the other end of the shop was Arthur Daly's wheeling and dealing office.
Emporium.
Yeah. But so at that stage, we opened, I think, the end of 94. We had the club. We had 2 floors of an office block on Oxford Street where we had distribution, DJ management, and we also had Nikki Smith came in from Peach. She had a setup there. We also had a magazine in there that was running a desk and office space. We had all this going on, and it was just
how at that time, with a bit of drive and a bit of foresight, you could do things, whereas by probably the end or maybe of your period, but definitely now, it's just very difficult. Other than the social media has opened it up a tiny bit, but it got to a point where it's just so rigid. That everything has got license or some sort of security level on it. You can't get anything past anybody, and I think that when you're smiling, it's of that time where anything could fly, really.
Lee, the people used to laugh at me because I never had a mobile phone. I made it purposeful not to hold a mobile phone. If you walked into my office, I had a big desk and I had 5 phones, and I knew what each phone had a different number, so I knew if I was getting a phone call, what would go on, and I wouldn't stop talking. Literally, from 10:30 in the morning, I probably wouldn't shut up until 6:30 at night, and I would talk so much that by the time I got home, I'd have tears in my eyes just through exhaustion, where it was just literally wheeling and dealing.
But driven by passion, though, right? Driven by pure adrenaline and passion.
Do you know what it was, and it was like a game. It was, I used to set myself challenges, because it was almost like, what deals am I going to do today? And I wouldn't, how would I say? It was, I wouldn't see it as who am I going to outsmart, because no one ever lost out. Everyone, it was good, honest business.
Yeah.
But it was almost like, what am I going to get up to today? I wouldn't know until the first phone call how the chain of events would go through the day. So someone might phone me up and they might say to me, "Gal, I've got a job like this." So what is that? Because I knew loads of people everywhere. And they say, "You're in the middle of London. Do you know anyone that needs some cartridges for a photocopier?" And or I've got 2 boxes of this, or I've got some T-shirts, and I think, yeah, okay, plain T-shirts. I know someone who will want that. They'll do printing on, and it would lead from whatever. I would swap T-shirts to get some slip mats into the shop, and then find out that, you know, if I wanted some printing, they do the printing for nothing. So then I'd phone up a record shop and say, "Listen, do you want some printed slip mats?" I would then, you know, it would just, the day would just, yeah, it would ping all over. And then someone else would come in with 2 boxes of promos. And you say, "Yeah, 2 boxes of promos." Then a distributor would come in, and I'd say to him, "What have you got on there?" I'll say, "Look, I'll give you a box of these exclusive promos. Give me 2 of each of those." And we would be swapping. And yeah, it would just be madness. And at the end of the day, we'd sit down and we'd have a laugh, and we'd think, "Oh, how did, you know?" And then of a weekend, of course, it got extra mad, because we'd all be in the club from 10 o'clock till 6 in the morning. And then when the club finished, I used to think to myself, right, now I can go and have a drink somewhere. And I'd end up going down to either the Channel Club or Ministry and roll out of there 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. Yeah, it was just, but it was, how can I say? It was a time of opportunity for a lot of young people. You know, nowadays I feel sorry for youngsters today, because it's really hard to be an entrepreneur. You can't take the chances. You know, back then you could almost blag a deal. You know, if you could sell yourself to someone, you could get a chance. So you could broker a deal. You know, you could go and get something made, knowing that you could sell it. You know, you knew that there was a marketplace out there, whether it was a club T-shirt, a record shop slip mat. You know, you could do stuff.
Right, listen, I'm gonna rein this in, because we're sitting here getting lost in the glory days of good old ye old London. There's still so much of this story that we've got to tell. So sorry, Lee, if I cut you off, if you're going to say anything. So let's roll it forward then. So by this time now, the label had fizzled out. The shop is going from strength to strength. The distribution is going well. Are you getting even bigger on the agency front, with more bigger names coming in? And of course, you know, Release the Groove was sort of like one of the pivotal record stores in London, that anybody that was passing through to play in London, they'd come down and visit. So it was like a hub, wasn't it, every weekend?
Yeah. It's interesting, because I think, you know, at that time, and Leah noticed, especially like when you're up in Leeds, you got Basics, Love to Be, and then you've got other fringe, other events that start coming up. And I think London was the same. You know, there was at the time, going back, I can name the events. There was us, Garage City, Feel Real, and Strictly Rhythm. you know, and then you had other events that started Club UK. You know, there was lots of different stuff. But the funny thing is, back then, you know, you could walk, like even you could go out, you could be doing your own night, and you could take an hour out. You could walk around the West End, and you could go and have a pint, or you could have a drink and a chat with 4 or 5 different promoters, and everyone, you know, everyone was friendly. The DJ thing, you know, there were other DJ agencies. There were people out there that, you know, there's money in there. There was an awful lot of DJs out there, and what tended to happen was every dog would have its day type of thing. So agencies became flavour of the year. So if one agent was getting more money for a DJ, then the other DJs would look and say, well, how comes Louis Vega is getting X amount of money? Why am I not getting that? And you'd have to try and explain to them, well, you're not the same. Mm-hmm. You know, you're getting the best amount of money. Yeah. And I would think to myself, I considered myself a good hustler, you know, and what I would do, I would try and get the best deal possible, but without breaking the bank. So I knew from a club promoter's point of view how clubs survive, how people make their money. So I could appreciate the promoter's side of things, but at the same time, I've still got to try and push for the DJ side of things. So when you've got DJs on our roster working for 500-600 quid, I thought that was reasonable. And I thought if I got enough gigs, they're walking away with thousands of pounds. At the same time, clubs also need to be able to earn a few quid because they've got all the staff and everything else. But we used to find that, yeah, some DJs that were not happy with the way that we were negotiating fees thought they could go and get more elsewhere. So, you know, we didn't hold them to contract, and it was very clear, you know, if you're not happy, see you later, you know. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose over a period of time, it became a chore, yeah, which was sad. And what you're finding is people were booking themselves out with 3 or 4 different agencies, not turning up. Yeah, you know, and it was one of those things, you know, we just thought, well, turn your back enough on it. Yeah, it wasn't a money earner for us. You know, we were just about covering wages of the staff that were doing all the running around. So we ended up fading out of that.
Okay, let me ask a question that you hope, I don't know how good your memory is. At some point, I would have come down to London, brought down by Patrick Smooth, got to meet yourself, got to meet Abby, Winston, Paul Warren, Jeremy, coming and buying records on a regular basis. And I started to make a name for myself in the Midlands. Do you remember how or why we ended up doing release at Bonds in Birmingham?
Yeah, because basically, when you were coming down, we got chatting. I think you'd actually been you came down with an event because you and Paul became very good friends.
After I was going to get to Paul, but that was off the back of him coming up and managing release for you.
Yeah. So basically, you came down, we got chatting. You mentioned that you would really like to get some of the scene going in Birmingham, and as I said, what can we do to help? Right. And that was how it was, you know.
And then I must have made the introduction to the guys at Money Pennies and Frank. I know you were dealing heavily with Frank at the time.
Yeah, basically, I think what it ended up was you knew that Frank wanted to do something on a certain night. They weren't busy or they weren't open, and it was a case of I came up, and talked the talk to Frank, and we talked ourselves into that venue, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And I then managed to get a bit of money out of Grolsch to pay for some printing, and you know, we gave it a shot.
Yeah, and it coincided with me just getting my radio show on Choice. So so I used to do the radio show 9 till 11 on the Friday night, and I called the radio show the pre-release showcase. So playing all of the music that people were going to be able to hear at the event, which we just called it Release, didn't we? We called it Release at Bonds. Bonds was the home of Miss Moneypennies, which was on a Saturday. We did it on a Friday. We brought I remember Ricky came and played. I remember Joey Masafi came and played. Other than that, my memory is very, very sketchy around that whole thing.
Victor Simonelli played. I think Danny Buda Morales played.
Wow, right. It's mental. I can't remember all of this.
Yeah, I've got some of the flyers somewhere.
Oh, mate, please dig them out. I would love to see those.
Yeah,
and then off the back of that, you sent a good friend of yours, Paul Groove, up to come and manage the nights, and off the back of that, Paul and I became dear friends, close friends. So that would have been 96, 97?
That would have been.
I don't think it definitely wasn't 95.
It would have been towards the end of 96.
Right. Okay.
It would have been towards the end of 96. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, Andy. It was a case, if you meet like-minded people, share, you know. The idea is let the thing grow. And that's what we did, you know, with the shop. We were able to, and the label, we had kids walking in with tapes. And what we were doing with the young kids then was doing 50-50 JVs. Say to them, right, you've got the track. Do you want to set up a label? What do you want to call the label? Didn't matter to me. We printed the label. It was just as cheap to do a printed label with someone's logo on it as it was to do a white label. You know, people didn't realise that to stick a label on cost you 10p. So we had lots of young kids come through, and we would give them a label identity. We'd tell them this is what it's going to cost. We'd put them in the studio to do the mastering. We'd let them attend the cut. And when the vinyl came in, we'd sell it. They get paid. Mm-hmm. And if they wanted to do
any names spring to mind that through that program that you could say who you really gave a you gave a shot to?
Well, Liquid People, you know, Dan and Conan came in with. I think we put out their first 5 or 6 records. Right. And of course, the Talking Heads thing was the one that really blew up. And again, that's another funny story because the track we did a white label. I mean, I need to be careful here on numbers. We did a white label, and Warner Brothers liked the white label, and basically said we want to sign the track. So, knowing a little bit about licensing and composition law, I knew that we owned the copyright of the composition. We weren't claiming any publishing, so there was no publishing infringement. So we knew that they liked it. We knew that Talking Heads liked it, and Warner Brothers called me in for a meeting, and I knew that I held the aces. So I thought, I'm walking in this room with absolutely nothing to lose. So they asked me how much I wanted, and I said 60. I have to laugh. I said 60 grand, and of course I got laughed out of the room. Where'd you get 60 grand from? I said, well, you know, it's a big track. Everyone's on it. It's potentially a number one. It's a monster. Anyway, that was never going to happen. But we got negotiated down. I think the final figure was it was either 5 or 10 grand fee, but 10,000 quid's worth of remixes for Dan and Conan. And that to me was worth more money because they were guaranteed extra remixes for Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. So that was
Nice.
a springboard for them, because they then got into Warner's. They got the money. We got paid for the record. The record ended up blowing up. You know, it was a big hit, and that was good. And also, we did a white label as well, not with them, but I did a white label of Whitney Houston with Keith KCC, and a very similar scenario. That Whitney Houston, Arista wanted to put the track out. I flew to America. I'm sitting in the office with Hoshkarelli, and I'm telling him I want 20,000 quid, because I know that they've paid Henry Simmons, they paid him $20,000 to clear the sample. So I'm thinking, well, if he's got 20 grand for the sample, I want 20 grand for the track. What I didn't know was that they tapped Keith up back in the UK and said to him, "Oh, Keith, we need you to remaster that mix." Whilst I'm in the room talking cash to them, trying to squeeze money out of them, he sent them a brand new composition, and yeah.
Through the fingers. I'm
sitting in the chair, literally. I'm sitting in the chair knowing that they've already put it out on the B side of something else. They are stuffed, you know. They've already put they've put the mix out on the B side of her following 12. That's how good the mix was. And what they did, they dangled the carrot in front of Keith, saying to Keith, "Look, we'll bring you in as our in-house producer, in-house remixer. Give us a new composition." Yeah. Anyway, it never happened that way, did it?
We got a few more people watching on YouTube. Chris Thomas says, "Lee, you need to speak." If you missed at the beginning, Chris, when we began, I did say that Lee and I were simply sitting here listening to Gary hold court, because he's the man with the stories. Also, shouts out to Dan and everyone else that's watching, and of course, people coming back on for the recording. Have you got any questions, Lee, or are you just happy sitting listening?
No, it's just intriguing to just hear the business side of it. You know, a lot of time we might be speaking to people and it's just been their DJ and the music they were liking at the time, how they got into the scene, and not just the clubs that they played, but it's really interesting because you were sort of screwing down into the business of contracts and, yeah, as you said, wheeler dealing. So it's I'm listening.
The funny thing is,
you talk about wheeler. Go on, Lee. Sorry, Gary. I was going to bring something else.
What I was going to say, and I think I was going to come in on what you were saying there. I left school with 6 CSEs. You know, I never studied business. I didn't know anything about a tax return. Didn't know anything about VAT returns. Didn't know anything about licensing, and yet I find myself sitting in the executive office in New York, talking big business, and I'm thinking, how did I get here? You know, it was just, I mean, even
gift
now,
of the gab. That's what it is.
Yeah, I look back and you know, I look at the T-shirts and I look at the stuff and I sometimes think to myself, was that real? Was that whole 25 years real? Because it never seemed that long. It's almost like we're going through a time warp. Everything seemed to happen, and 25 years later, you're still talking to the same people, still got the same friends, and I mean, to be honest, the scene hasn't moved on, has it? So I think that's where you look. I still look on Facebook, still see DJs doing the same thing, and you listen to some of their cassettes and see the music, and the good tunes are still the good tunes.
Yeah. But the benefit of hindsight always gives you the opportunity to see where mistakes were made, where you could have capitalized a little bit better. You could have been a bit more shrewd. But then again, I think you've done everything from your heart and with the purest of intentions. And that's why you are held in such high esteem by so many people, you know, up and down the country, around the world. everyone that I've said we were going to be talking to you, they're like, oh, say hi to Gary for me, man. Oh, man's got stories. So let's skip forward then to one of the opportunities. I wasn't leading into this, but it just come to me. We were talking about, people coming into you with tapes and productions. Skipping forward a few years to when I started making music myself, we did a reworking of a track, and I mentioned Paul Groove. He said he would talk to you and see if you would be interested in putting out, because he really liked it. So let me hear your perspective on the story from what you remember.
Right. So this is how it would work. We'd have a we'd have a battered old tape machine. We had a DAT player, and we had a battered old tape machine in the back in our not in the shop office, in the wheeler dealer office. And it's, the funny thing is, I used to buy records, but when we opened the shop, I never bought a record, and I never took a record. And it's almost like my record collection didn't really grow from that point. I always used to think, leave it on the shelf, someone can sell it, and if I can always get another one another time. But I had a good ear, I could if Jeremy was playing a track, I would come out and I would say to him, what's that track? And I wouldn't do it all the time. What's that track? And it would have an element about it, it had that little bit of fairy dust in it. And you knew that it was a special track. You knew that it was going to be more than a test press 500 unit. You knew it was going to have legs. So Winston and I, Jeremy, Abby, we had a shop full of ears, and we had a shop where DJs would be coming in, especially like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If a tape came in and Paul would say, Paul brought your tape in, within 20 seconds of listening to it, I would say yes or no, because I knew if a track had legs. Winston would then go out, he would play it to Abby, play it to Jeremy, the tape deck on the thing would go on, and all of a sudden it would be big seller. And we knew that it was a no-risk track. We knew that we were not only good for 500, but possibly a repress should we get to that point, And then with the distributors coming into the shop, if they had time, we would bring them in and say, right, this is the track. And we would pre-sell. And then we'd get on to the exporters. And we knew we had a good relationship. We had a good rapport with everybody and didn't exclude anyone. No one got excluded. Everyone was in. And we knew, and we could say to you, right, Ange, yeah, you got that thing. You'd then say to us, well, look, this hasn't happened, that hasn't happened. Okay, how do we want to do it then? Do we want to go for the first 500 or 1,000 and then have another conversation with anyone else that might be involved further down the line? Or we'd work out a strategy. Would we offer some of the white labels into the A&R men? We had the ears of the industry, so we could do that without having to spend bundles of money, and that's how it is. So the track in question was I mean, you've heard the story continued, didn't it? Because
yeah. So, but I mean, everybody knows. We pressed up the original white labels of Strings of Life through Gary. He distributed them for us. We then added a vocal to it that was also distributed, and it was huge everywhere. And then it was a few years later. Everyone's heard this story, but I think it's important to tell it with Gary now. A few years later, Danny Krivit did his own edit of it that he played on a boat party in London, and just by coincidence, I'd posted something on one of the music forums about these are the tracks that I made. The people behind Whistle Bump saw my post and said, "Oh, we've just heard that. We really love it. We want to license it." And then, you know, the chain of events moved on, that it became a top 10 hit. But it was because of Gary's vision and my good friend Paul, who helped initially to get that out there. And so that's why I've got a lot of a lot of time, a lot of love, amongst many other reasons, for Gary. So thank you for being part of that. One of the biggest things to happen to me with that show.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was a monster track. It was a monster track, and like you say, when we have these type of conversations now, you think back and you take great pleasure in knowing that you were part of something. Lee, you must get that all the time. You know, when you look back and you think that how big the club was, how many smiles can you recall? You know, how much joy have you brought to people over the years? And that's the pleasure. The pleasure. The money was never. It was never about the money, because, you know, we didn't make bundles of money because we had so many members of the team in the office. You know, we paid wages and we paid bills, you know, and then you know, tax man and everyone, you paid everything. But the sheer joy that everything, the end result was a people smile, people talking in forums like now, what a great track. You know, you look at posts on there, people say, oh, this track was brilliant, you know, and you think to yourself, here we are 25 years, 30 years down the road, people still appreciate some of the stuff that we did, you know, and we all did that. You know, you on the radio, Lee with the club, and Dave. I mean, look, I'm surprised we're not seeing Dave on. I'm in the jungle trying to get him out of the jungle in Australia. You know,
but won't be too long.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes when I keep watching some of these documentaries, some of these things that they do, I'm disappointed to see some of the unsung heroes, some of the people that did the nitty gritty week in, week out. You know, there's always the go-to people that are invited to talk, but I think the scene was far bigger than that. And I think it's the smaller people, and I would say the tens of thousands of, I wouldn't say smaller people, but the tens of thousands of worker bees that buzzed around this industry are what made the industry. Yeah. Because it was their energy that made everything happen.
I think the whole phrase, the Soulful House Mafia, I think it sits really, really well, because you do have people, and you would have been one of those people, sat at the big table, and then it filters down, and you have got your thousands of foot soldiers who helped make everything happen. So from the dancers to the promoters to the flyer people to all of those, and that's why we do this on a regular basis, because we do want to give credit to all of those people, and it's a long journey, and every week we are going to be mentioning these names. And you know, for yourself, I'll get around to the question I was going to ask you. I know you're busy now, and we will come to that, but so you might not have the time to do it. Have you ever thought, maybe I should digitize some of the back catalogue, maybe I can get involved, even though there's no money in it whatsoever? Have you ever thought, you know, there's a little something inside of you that wants to get involved again?
I've thought about it lately, because I'm disappointed. You know, I've looked after the catalogue, and through looking after the catalogue, every year or every 2 years, I get a licensing deal, simply because the tracks are not throwaway tracks. You know, I've kept away from cashing in on the 30p download, because I think the product stays more valuable, especially for those people that have bought it. You know, people that bought vinyl cherish that vinyl. People that were given a CD probably lost that CD after 6 weeks, because they were given a bucket load of other CDs and they never had to pay for it. They always paid more respect to something they paid cash for. You know, so those people that bought the vinyl cherish the vinyl. They cherish the sleeve, and like you say, I saw a message from Mike Delgado, because he now wants to remix and release the Murder EP out on his own label, and it's disappointing because I've talked to Mike about all the licensing deals that have been done since, compilations and whatever. He's always been able to claim 100% of the publishing. I never asked for any publishing, even though I did a buyout on the track. And I'm disappointed that after looking after the track for this amount of time, it's going to turn into a disposable track because it's going to become a download, which probably won't last a couple of months. But the other stuff is fine. The other stuff is fine. So the answer to that is no. And I don't think I would put anything out for.
What about what about merchandise? If someone says, "Oh, you know what? I'd really love one of those classic release for pleasure T-shirts or baseball cap." If
they wanted them, I'll get them done.
You can pull a few strings.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can still get stuff done. I mean, my friend Matt Punton works in merchandise, and Matt and Dan will probably be watching this, and he's asked me a couple of times, and I've said to him, look, if you do it so it's affordable. Don't print them up to sell them at 20 quid. Do them if you're going to whack them out for like a tenner, because release in any shape or form was never about exploiting people for big cash. We were in it because we were in it because we loved to be in it, and it was always about value. Our door prices were the lowest price in the West End. You know, vinyl was cheap, T-shirts were cheap. It's about spreading the word. You know, it was about.
It's a great ethic. It's a great ethic. It's a great ethic to have. So
yeah.
We've really, and we'll start rounding things up slowly, but we really haven't. And I'm sure you'll agree, we haven't even started with half of the story, really, have we? There's so many conversations, so many twists and turns in the story down the years that would have taken. And I'll repeat what I said at the very beginning. Anybody that knows Gary Dillon will be watching this with a smile on their face, and they'll be chuckling at so many of the stories that you've told us. But for me, what I think is incredible is the journey that you took to where you are now. So tell us exactly what goes on in your life now.
Well, I am the elected ward councillor for Charlton. So I now represent my community at the Royal Borough of Greenwich. I am a local authority official, if you could say that, yeah. I'm vice chair of the planning board. I sit on the licensing committee, which is interesting because having that previous experience being involved in the licensed industry, you know, applying for licenses, I now sit on that. I sit on children and young people's scrutiny. So I'm part of the committee that makes sure that children and young people in this borough get a great education. You know, we've got, you know, I'm literally, instead of I wouldn't say wheeling and dealing in the music business, what I'm doing now is representing everyone in the community and trying to make sure that the best deal possible, we get great value for money on the council, that we provide the best services. Here I am, a local politician in the area. I'm born and bred in the area. So for me, I'm just really proud that I've come from being a street urchin, if you could say that, as a kid selling newspapers outside the local railway station, to now being the local elected councillor, and the local community voted for me to represent them, and it's I take great pride in that.
It's an incredible story. And and your two boys, you have two boys. Do you, like myself, you want to keep their innocence, but you also want to make them aware of it's a big bad world out there. How do you talk to the kids? Do they have a little bit of street edge to them, or are they quite innocent?
Well, it's quite. I met my wife. We've been married now 14 years, and it's another funny story. We met online. My wife is from Australia, and she was living in India, and I'm obviously in London. And my dad and my grandmother were always on to me, why don't you get married and settle down? Now, if you're doing what I was doing, you could only do that really as a single man, because I could fly by the skin of my pants because I had no responsibility. If I took a punt on a deal and it failed, the only person I needed to worry about was myself. And, I could scrounge a meal, and that's how it was. But when I got married, it was shortly after my dad had passed away. So I'd already sort of eased out of the music business. I'd stopped doing the clubs probably round about 2003. I think that was the last time I put on a proper event, and I became tired, and I'm not just tired physically, but I just got tired with the business. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm working flat out 24/7 for other people, and I'm not enjoying it. So I scaled down. And then when my dad got ill, I offered the boys that were in the shop, I gave the shop to them. So 2006, I said to them, right, here's the shop. Here's all of the stock. You can keep the lot, but just pay the rent. And in 2008, I got a phone call from the landlord to tell me that they hadn't paid the rent. And basically, they wanted the keys back. So that's how the shop ended up, which was a big disappointment because, if someone had offered me a business with the stock free of charge, I would have bit both arms off, So I'd already worked myself out of the business and met my wife. Like I say, we met online. We got chatting and crash bang wallop. Within 6 months, we were married. A couple of years later, the two boys have arrived, and she didn't know too much, obviously, about the past, about the music and everything else. And she watched a documentary on TV one day, and all of a sudden my face pops up. She says, "That looks like you." I said, yeah, it is. She said, "You never told me about that." I went, "Well, there's probably some things I've not told you about, but too late now, we're married."
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And we laugh. We have a good laugh. But let's say my wife's background is completely different to mine. So the kids have got a really good blend. They've got a bit of my cheek, but they're two nice kids. But it's a worry end. I've got two boys in central London. It is a worry. It is a worry. But they've got good heads on. They've both got good, strong heads on their shoulders. They're quite clever. They're clever boys, and now they're at an age where I can tell them some bedtime stories about some of Daddy's antics, and they do have a very good chuckle about them. So
well, I'm sure I would like to be there. I would like to be a fly on the wall for some of those bedtime stories, because I've got to repeat again. It's very clear, I'm sure, that how little we've covered tonight, and yet I think we've covered some very important topics. Lee, you want to throw anything in, or ask any other questions?
No, I think it's been really good, different to some of the other ones that we've done, and eye opening. And I think what comes across is the art of the deal, the passion for it, and it burnt very bright at that time, and you got the memories, and we can still all talk about these things, and we left our mark. That's what I say every time we do one of these, whoever it is, we left our mark, and you did it in a really big way down there.
I think as well, Lee, you know what it is? The education. You know, us. I mean, I wouldn't say that we're granddads of the industry, but what we've learned is so valuable to younger people. I mean, when I think about it, going right back to the beginning, and you know, I got involved in this scene, the club scene, very early, and it took me in, and you know, I after about 2.5 years, you know, I got consumed, and I came out the wrong end of it. You know, for about 7 months, I ended up in a right mess. I ended up with no money. You know, and this is wheeling and dealing, and don't forget, in the early stages of the house industry, there was a whole lot of stuff going on, and you get sucked in, and if you're not too careful, it can destroy people. And I think at one point I'd got in too deep, and it's almost like being caught up in an hurricane. Next thing you know, I found myself in a bedsit, no money, and I thought to myself, what happened there? You know, one minute I was doing this, and I thought to myself, you know, I had a wake-up call, and I had a wake-up call, and I thought to myself, right, I'm going to go again, and that's when, and this was between working with Nicky and doing stuff with Richard. There was a gap in between where I was in a bad place, and I got through it, and I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm not going to go anywhere near there, and I'm going to keep my head screwed on, and that's what I did. And then what I did, again, I allowed any young person that had a question or wanted to do any type of experience, they were welcome. You know, come in, sit in the office for a couple of days, watch how we do stuff, do the Saturdays in the shop, come in. This is the place of opportunity. You know, you might stay for a week, whatever, but listen and learn. Listen, watch and learn. There's a lot of people here that have come from the same place that you've come from, with nothing, but as a group, we are big and we are something. And, you know, I'm looking at some of the grime boys. You know, when we opened the grime section in the shop, everyone, oh, you know, grime, trouble and whatever. But, you know, we were there at one point, you know. I mean, you look now, I think you look in Facebook, some of the back to 89 things, they're showing all those scandalous headlines, kids on acid and whatever. Grime was the new thing, wasn't it? Yeah. And I take great pleasure in seeing people like Roll Deep, Deneo, and all those people that came through the shop now on One Extra, now the Brits. Just, you know, yeah, it's great. It's great. So
it's insane. Well, I think you've definitely left a mark. You've definitely created a legacy, and you are definitely somebody that I know will be remembered way into the future for your involvement, your experience, and your inspiration as well. And personally, for myself, mate, I just want to say thank you for being such a huge part of the story. And if you would allow us, we'd love to have you back on again and have more of these chats with someone else, and we'll have a laugh and a joke about some of those Saturday afternoons and whatever. I really could sit here talking all night, and I know that people have been hanging on every word. So I'm just going to say a few goodbyes to everybody. Lee, respect, mate. Thank you for being here, dude. We'll be back with some more DJs in the future. And Gary, thank you, brother. It's been priceless.
And before I go, I want to say a big up to Steve Lavinia,
yes,
and Bobby. We're all thinking of you, and I think Andy, you'll mention the GoFundMe fund that they're saving. Just let the family know that all of us, from whatever club, from whatever record shop, probably from all over the world, because the family is well known all over the world, and there's big love to Stevie, and we're all thinking of you, and we wish you well. And also big up to Paul Trouble Anderson, miss him as well. Big friend of Release and big friend of mine. And yeah, it's the first opportunity I've had to say anything. So not forgotten. Oh, and Phil Asher.
I was just about to say
Phil Asher and Andy
Werrell,
old friend. Still in our thoughts.
Fallen soldiers, each and every one of those. Gary, I'm gonna mention about this party in October now. So I'll bid you both farewell, and I'll catch up tomorrow.
Lee, great talking to you, and Andy, thank you for inviting me. Cheers.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Nice one.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And there go the boys, hanging on every word of that. I was happily sitting and listening to the wisdom of Mr. Gary Dillon, and I'll be sending this out as a podcast to my network, and I just hope that you'll share it if you enjoyed that knowledge, because it was knowledge indeed. So let's go back to this party then. Sunday the 3rd of October. It's only a few weeks away. September tomorrow. Mental. Bobby and Steve in support of the beloved Stevie. A fundraising benefit event from 2:00 in the afternoon until 1:00. Information is here on the screen at the Ministry of Sound. If you do a search anywhere online, on Facebook or on Skiddle. If you can't make it, there's also a GoFundMe where you can donate some money. Words really can't do justice to how influential those two guys are, how pretty much all of us owe something to them, and so we're all going to be doing our very best to show our support, and I know you will also if you are able. Many minutes, many hours into tonight's stream. Gutted that we couldn't do it on Facebook. Hopefully that'll all be sorted by the next time we come back to you. Soulful House Mafia, big love to you. Pressing this button and I am done. Respect, guys. One love.